What's up, everyone? How's everyone doing? Here's another episode of Cage Talk. Today, my guest, it's the very first Canadian welterweight champion in the UFC. We have Carlos the Ronin Newton. How you doing today, man?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks, Alex. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Again, it's crazy. Like we just talked a little bit about it. Like a lot of people think, GSP, is the not only the greatest Canadian MMA fighter, but the only one. But there's been champions before him, and again, I think you kind of get overlooked sometimes. To be honest with you, I guess like the older days and stuff like that. But I mean, hey man, you were like the only one back in the day that could actually rock a speedo, bro. I'm just saying, like no homo, like you were like ridiculously like just like I think the only person like back in the day that wear a speedo too would be like I don't know fucking Shoney Carter, and that was not good to
Yeah,
watch.
yeah, yeah.
So
And Shoney was fun, man. Shoney were very entertaining. There was only one Shoney Carter.
that is true.
Yeah, yeah.
I,
He definitely helped. He's the type of guy that helped build the Tough Show, the Ultimate Fighter reality series. Shoney, I think, helped put that show on the map.
I mean, like I said,
Yeah,
I've had Shoney
that's
on
it.
the so I had Shoney on the show too, and the funniest thing was like I've had him. He was one of my longest guests. I had him for almost an hour and like 15 minutes. I think 5 minutes we actually talked about fighting. The rest it was just like him just going off in tangents and talking random shit. And I just let him have the floor, man. It was the funniest thing.
Yeah, yeah. Shoney Carter. Only one Shoney Carter, man. Yeah.
Well, there's only one Carlos Newton, man. Okay, let's talk about your career because again, I think you're one of the only fighters, especially back in the day, that had that you were fighting in the UFC, and then a few months later you were fighting in Pride, and then you would go back to the UFC. How did that work out for you? How did you get that deal done? Again, not too many
Well,
people got to do that, right?
I had a good manager. I had a very, very good manager. And within the sport, at the time, even though it still wasn't structured like a sport at the
Mhm.
time, there was still some element of competition between promoters,
Okay.
to get fighters. And both the UFC and Pride wanted me at the same time, and we worked out a deal.
Which
Yeah.
one? Which?
Yeah. I'm sure there are situations where,
Uh huh.
pardon?
Which organization do you like working for
Yeah.
more? I mean, you fought a lot more in Pride than you did in UFC, but just did you like
Well, that answers your question, man. That
what's
answers your question. Japan,
yeah.
there was nothing like fighting in Japan. It was by far on another level,
Yeah.
another emotional experience, physical experience. It was a very cultural experience. You know, it's like fighting in the UFC is like vacationing at home.
Okay. Yeah.
Fighting in Pride is like going on vacation in Japan.
Hmm.
It's like, yeah, yeah, you can't compare a difference, right? Fighting the UFC was like going on vacation in your hometown,
Hmm.
and fighting in Japan was like going on a worldwide tour, you know,
Gotcha.
for your vacation. It's a vacation.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
How long now?
it's
How long
sightseeing
did
on another
you
level.
now? How long did you do like preparation for like actually getting to Japan and then doing like the Pride fight? Like, was it like say like a week before like the fight, or was it like 2 weeks you preparing yourself? How did that work? Like preparation for to go overseas and
Well,
stuff.
we had to get there a week before the fight,
Okay.
so that was just one thing. But oh yeah, we train season officially was 3 months long,
Okay.
and outside of training season, you're just training. You're just having fun and training. Yeah, enjoying it. And so it's like you always go. You're always
Mhm.
ready.
Do you miss fighting in
And
Japan?
uh I miss I miss competition in general.
Okay.
I miss being in that great of shape. You
Mhm.
know, I miss, you know, uh, I, it's something I remember. You know, as I tell my kids, you know, man, if I had my superpower still, oh, you guys would be dead all the same time. I wouldn't have to move because, yeah, physically, it was quite like for me to see those superpowers. My kid would have to be in danger. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the only time I actually feel them,
Mhm.
like great concern or something. But yeah, it's a whole nother level when you're just standing around. You can put your footprints on somebody's ceiling when you feel like
Definitely. No,
it.
100%. I get you on that one.
Yeah, it was cool.
Now,
Yeah.
how did you start martial arts? Like it was something again, talked to a lot of fighters back when, the early days of when MMA was growing and stuff, and a lot of people didn't really think of it as a career. At that time it was just something, you wanted to do, you wanted to compete. What about your take? Was it something similar or no?
Oh, I've been doing martial arts since I was a kid. My stepfather was a black belt in Shokan karate. That's where I started out, and it just branched and just kept growing from there. That's all.
Got it.
Yeah, I had a great instructor when I came to Canada. When I moved to Canada, I had a great instructor, Thomas Sharkey. He was a two-time Vietnam veteran. He went twice to Vietnam, did 2 tours, and actually did a third one as a UDT after that, the first generation of Navy SEALs.
Okay.
And when he retired, he became my instructor. Yeah. So I kind of came up in the kill, 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 kill arts
Mhm.
first. And then I just kind of watered, I just kind of like sanitized it all, vaccinated it all to make it safe enough for MMA. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Well, where was
That's what
your
happened.
first pro fight?
First one was in Montreal. Yeah, I was pretty young. I was like 18. I'm one of the few guys. Yeah, yeah, I was in the UFC and Pride when those shows were starting out, and fought in the UFC as the sport started to explode. But I'm also one of those guys, probably one of the only few guys who actually fought when there was no holds barred, when the sport was called NHB, no holds barred fighting,
Gotcha.
where we had no weight classes. So my first fight, I was 180 pounds. I fought a guy 286 pounds. So yeah,
God.
yeah. I'm part of the you can't shit your pants generation. Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you
Yeah.
probably think about it now, and you probably think we're all a bunch of softies, especially.
Oh yeah, I'm fucking the wusses now. Oh, this guy's half a pound over.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I fought a lot of my fights being the small guy. I fought a lot of them that way.
So I know how the fight went, obviously, but how'd you? What was your game plan going through? Was that to try to kind of like beat him with cardio, make sure you didn't get caught in situations where you had to use a lot of your cardio, your muscles?
Again, main part of the game plan was don't get hit by such a big guy.
Yeah.
By such a weight by such a a weight difference. Don't get clocked in the head.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's like it'll be like getting punched by the Hulk.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a big guy. So that was the main game plan. Don't get punched. Don't get hit. And yeah, just go in there. Use your speed, endurance, your agility, and try and win this fight.
And
Yeah.
how long were you in that league for?
That wasn't a league, and quite frankly, there are no leagues in MMA. They could call themselves that, but they are not leagues. They are individual promoters. Don King didn't have a league either. So, yeah, in that promotion,
Mhm.
uh, that promotion wasn't around very long. Did a few shows, and that was the early days of things where everybody was trying to get a foothold and become the monopoly,
Yep.
and
No.
until somebody
Did it right?
finally. So,
Now, now, how'd you get into the UFC? Was it? I've heard some strange stories. I've heard people, friends of friends, said, "Hey, here's a number. call them. I'll give you an application. How did Carlos Newton get into the UFC, man?
Back in those days,
Hmm.
you could actually climb somewhat unofficial rankings.
Okay,
They kind of existed back then.
not like
Promoters didn't
not like now, right?
promoters didn't have the you know the impunity to do whatever they wanted back
Hmm.
then. You know, and we could actually climb the rankings. So by the time I entered the UFC, I was 5-time national champion. I was already winning high level competitions, and they want to be seen as a promotion with high level fighters. Well, they go after you. Now the UFC can put any Joe Bum in there, and people still show up because it's the UFC. That's how the monopoly works, and that's why they think they're a league. They're not.
Gotcha, gotcha.
So
I'm assuming you don't agree with what UFC is doing lately, or just how the.
no, I don't agree with the structure of the sport. It's not that I don't agree with the UFC.
Okay.
Structure of sport right now is not structured like a sport.
Mhm.
It, you
More
need
entertainment, right? It's almost
And
like.
right now it's just entertainment. Right
Mhm.
now it's just entertainment, but it's not structured like a sport. A sport is, and this is under the sports accord or even the Olympic rules for a sport. What's the definition of a sport? Is official, legitimate, competitive
Mhm.
criteria to
Yeah,
determine who climbs the ladder, not whether or not you're an asshole or you
you
lick someone's ass.
showboat. Yep. Agree.
That's it.
Yeah, I think
You know,
I had John
is that's yeah.
I had John Finch on, and he was explaining the whole how bullshit the whole ranking system is, which is true. You know, they pick and choose who they want to rank and who gets
Yeah,
the title shot compared to back
yeah,
in the day. It was, you know,
yeah.
whoever.
Whereas in boxing, if a boxing promoter does that in boxing, or a sanctioning body
Mhm.
does that in boxing, the boxer will sue them, and the boxer will win. It has already happened.
Mhm.
The WBC lost a court case in the '80s, and they were sued for 30. They lost, and the judge awarded 30 million to the fighter,
Oh
and it
wow.
was just other fighters begged the guy not to go ahead because he's going to bankrupt the most legitimate and prestigious title in boxing if he pursued the 30 million that the judge awarded him.
Mhm.
But fighters like guys like Mayweather Senior, from everyone, everyone,
Yeah.
even Tyson's trainer at the time, Costamodo, all these guys are just saying, do not bankrupt this company, because if you bankrupt this sanctioning body, the most recognized title in boxing will be gone.
Mhm.
And when that happens, it's hard to promote.
Gotcha.
It's not just hard to promote, but the prestige of the title is built on those who fought for it.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's how it happens.
Do you see anything with the UFC as of right now that could go back to maybe the way it was, or like even just not being such a more like sports entertainment, like almost like just back to like regular competition? You know, the best, 135 pounder versus another 135 pounder, or is it just?
Yeah, yeah. Well, the problem
Mhm.
is it's the combination of a sanctioning body and promoter as one entity. And no sport in the world is that allowed where the promoter can have exclusive contracts.
Okay.
That's basically it. You race in NASCAR for a NASCAR title. NASCAR is a sanctioning body, but they're also the title holder. NASCAR is not allowed to have exclusive contracts with drivers. They don't. And
Gotcha.
they actually got sued in court for monopoly,
Mhm.
and they won the case based on that fact. They said, Judge, we don't have any exclusive contracts, so how could we be a monopoly? How could, if people want to compete for another title, let them.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because we're the most recognized title in NASCAR because we actually put in the work. We put in the business acumen to achieve that.
Hmm.
And the judge said, yeah, you're right. Agreed. Done.
Interesting.
Yeah. Whereas in boxing, promoters have done what the UFC has achieved, but through nefarious means, through bribes, through backdoor deals, and so forth. And the courts in the U.S. cracked down on that, and they passed legislation called the Muhammad Ali Act to basically spell out in clear detail, you can't do this shit.
Mm-hmm.
But in the UFC, they do this shit all day long, upside down, sleeping. They do it while they're sleeping. They do it. They do it while they're doing anything they're doing. They're doing it when they're not even doing it, because the way the sport's structured, it happens by default. It is the default that you're going to get screwed. That you're going to have to beg for a title shot. That the lowest bidder will fight.
Mm-hmm. I get you. That's
That's funny, man. Yeah.
crazy how, like I said, the sport, has evolved, and how the UFC has evolved too.
Well, the way it has evolved, it's affecting other sports now too. It's greatly affecting golf. You have Live versus the PGA right now, and Live is calling themselves a league. It's one promoter. Who do you think they got that idea from? And it's not hard to see. It's the Saudi government, but the Saudi government at one point owned a good portion of the UFC.
Mhm.
They sold it when they sold their shares when the new company took over, WWEW. So yeah, it's just that type of corruption. It just, the only way you could compete with it is to be more corrupt than it.
Yeah.
And other sports are starting to get their foundations undermined because this illegitimate structure is allowed to happen.
Now, as a former fighter, does that bother you at all? That, like, the way the sport's been handled now compared to the back in the day, when you were fighting?
Back in the day, even though the sport wasn't officially structured like a sport, people had an idea of what it should be like.
Okay.
And then one day Zuffa came along, and a bunch of rich guys came along and say, you know what, if we buy this, we can actually do it this way and have a monopoly, because nobody's looking. None of the rules have been codified in law. Nothing's been officially, there's no governing, sanctioning body. There's the athletic commissions, who have long ago forgotten how to do things properly and are just following the rules, and quite frankly don't know why they are. They said, hey, if we do this way, we can end up with a monopoly. And the UFC spent $40 million in losses before they made a single penny, but they knew that investment would
Come back.
billions. They knew that. That's how monopolies work, man. They put the big input to create the monopoly, and after that, they fuck everybody.
I don't think, to be honest, I really didn't like. I think it just hurts the sport in general, because there's just one organization or one league, right? I don't buy it. Like, I liked when WEC was around. I liked Pride when it was around. I think it's good for
and you like it when the fighters can move between the promotions.
Yeah.
That's the best, because you have what you now have in boxing, the unified titles, the undisputed guy, and that's how the competition keeps growing and growing. When a guy has 10 titles, until the guy who comes with 11 titles, if that guy's a top dog, regardless, who cares what you think about him? And he doesn't care what you think about him either, so he's not going to act like an asshole or just do stupid things. He's going to act like a regular person and let their scales do the talking. So yeah, and that's the thing. I love the sport. I do. And one of the things why I exited the sport and kind of just really doubled down in university while I was holding my title is because I saw it coming.
Okay.
I was like, no, man, I'm not gonna play this game. And as a result, exited the sport, and I just became more active in the advocating for the fighters' rights, advocating for the proper structure of the sport, advocating for the proper enforcement of a proper structure of the sport, and things like that. So we got work to do. We're making progress.
When do you think it would get back to normal? When do you think this will? Is it when Dana White's gone? When there's a new?
When we win our court case. Right now, we have a class action lawsuit against them for antitrust violation in the U.S. And we're also lobbying Congress and the House of Representatives to pass the Muhammad Ali Act
Mhm.
to MMA. It applies to boxing, but if we can get it applied to MMA, the very structure of a promoter with their own title as being their own sanctioned body will
Mhm.
then become illegal. In boxing, that's illegal. A sanctioned body cannot have any interest in a promoter, and as because a promoter cannot have any interest in a fighter if they are a sanctioned body.
Gotcha. I think there's a group of retired fighters as well. I think Chung Lee is in that group. 'Cause
Yeah, yeah.
right.
I'm the guy who started the class action suit. But
Okay,
because
cool.
I'm a Canadian citizen and I didn't fight for a while, I
Wow.
wasn't able to be the guy to certify the class action. So
Gotcha.
I basically got guys like Chung Lee, Randy Couture, John Finch to step in and be the head plaintiffs. But I'm the guy who I flew out to Arizona in like 2011
Mhm.
and stood in front of a law firm and explained it to them, and they said, "How the heck does nobody not know this?" But nobody cares. They just want to see. They're like the Romans, just entertain us. But if you're the fighter, you just want to compete.
Yeah.
That's it, right? And the one time when we were bringing the lawsuit through the courts, they tried to say many things like, "Oh, we're not a sport, we're entertainment." I said, "No, you're a sport, and you are entertainment because all sports are entertainment, but not all entertainment is sport. So you gotta pick one.
Yeah.
And if you're just entertainment, that's illegal. Fighting on the streets for someone's entertainment is illegal."
Yeah.
If it's not in a regulated sport like boxing, taekwondo, judo, you can be arrested and thrown in jail.
Well, that's cool that
It's
I
legal.
like I said. I remember talking. I remember having Chung Lee. I remember having John Finch and talking a little bit about this. And I remember there was a big group of guys. But it's interesting that I didn't even know that you were like the main guy. But that's good.
Yeah, spread the
It's
word.
the more the merrier, man. Especially
Yeah,
to.
spread the word. Yeah.
All right, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about your time in the UFC. Okay,
Yeah.
so you had a couple fights there. You fought Dan Henderson. You fought Matt Hughes. Your first winning the title, UFC 31 against Pat Miletic. Again, a guy I had on the show. Um, how was that fight? Your preparation going into a title fight? 'Cause you were like, how much do you weigh, bro? You were chiseled. I think your traps were like above your ears and shit. Like you were ridiculously, man. You were on point, bro.
Yeah, I know. When it comes to highlight reels, I still got the most ripped clips.
Like
I know
like
the bulldog choke is still the
yeah,
most ripped
that
clip.
fucking that bulldog choke, your arms like and the veins and your back. I was like, Jesus Christ, like
No, I'll take credit for that. That is the most ripped clip in MMA history. Like nobody can beat it.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
I'm not ashamed. I'm not boasting when I say that. I'm just not. You don't believe me? Watch it yourself. But and that's cool, But those were the early days of the sport where you could prepare, where you could be prepared and fight when you feel most prepared, and expect that from your opponent.
mhm,
They'll fight you when they're most prepared. The sport's so screwed up now that guys are just getting calls out of the blue.
yep,
Hey, you ready to fight next week? If you don't take it, I don't know. I'll call you next time.
yeah,
So you jump on it, and you don't do your own matchmaking. The promoter is doing the matchmaking, which
mhm,
for the most part, somebody's getting dirty end of the stick,
yeah,
right? So my days in the UFC very different from what fighters have to face now.
mhm,
Some of them, tons of them, quite frankly, just being fed to wolves all day long.
mhm.
And these wolves are not really wolves because they're eating freaking bread for breakfast.
Gotcha, gotcha.
They're eating soggy ass toast for breakfast, thinking they're tough guys. That's just the way it is. But when everybody's able to look out for their own best interest, meaning the fighters have all the power and leverage to look out for their best interest, That's where you're going to see the most competitive fights, the most explosive fights. Where you're going to see the most. You're going to see the most sacrifice,
Hmm.
and you're going to see guys really put it on the line. Not guys who are just like begging for fights and just
Call each other out.
starving to fight. Like it's crazy, man. It's
Yeah.
completely crazy, and you're not gonna end up with like what looks like an illusion of a sport, just because they're drug testing. But quite frankly, they drug test who they want to drug test. It's kind of like Russia. If you're on their good side, you don't get arrested for corruption. As soon as you're on the wrong side of Putin, oh, we gave him $4 billion. I hope he didn't spend too much of it on himself. That's what's happening right now with Prigozhin. And like, yeah, I'm into the whole political thing too. But yeah, that's the time in UFC, right? So it would be super awesome if guys could do what I did. Fly to Japan one month,
Hmm.
3 months later, no, they're fighting in the US. And sometimes, that happens in boxing. You can fight a champion in his hometown and beat that champion. But that champion might say, you know what, you owe me a rematch. And the guy who beat him could be like, okay, then you're gonna have to fight me in my hometown. And you
Hmm.
get these scripts that you just can't do in MMA because everything happens in Vegas. Yeah. Yeah, and they're talking about their bottom line, whereas a fighter, if they want to make the most money they can, they're gonna make their most money in their hometown most of the time if it's a good pay-per-view venue to begin with, right? You get a lot of crazy stuff, man, and there are a lot of fighters globally who just can't even enter the UFC just because they don't have a friend of a friend who has a friend who can give them the number of this guy, you know. Whereas in boxing, those rankings are legit, and you know who's the number one fighter in the world, and you know exactly where they're coming from.
Hmm.
And there's a path for everyone.
Gotcha.
So the competition is far more intense. Yeah, back then the competition was a lot more legitimate than it is now.
Hmm.
Yeah,
So,
even though it
I,
wasn't
I,
official,
what's up?
even though it wasn't like official,
Hmm.
you know. But now the competition is just officially not there. They don't care.
Yeah,
They just don't care. These guys can slap their wives and the next day promote a show. Like they just don't care.
I've seen that happen, right? Video. um, how did you match up with Pat? Were you like, did you think about like you were gonna take him down, wear him down, or what was your game plan going into that match?
Pat was the classic like fighter. As a young guy, the only kind of thing that ever worried me a little bit was the amount of experience the guy might have.
Okay.
And Pat Miletich at the time had a tremendous amount of experience, right? So I knew that if I make things predictable for him and kind of like a fight as a fight as usual,
Hmm.
you know, it's probably he can take me the distance and win on decision
Hmm.
just because he's better playing that game possibly. But I said, if I keep the intensity and keep the scrambles happening and just keep it unpredictable, just freaking throw everything at the wall and see what sticks,
Hmm.
right? Like, don't just grapple this guy. Stand there, strike with him, stand up with him, stay in front of him, right? Because MMA, the saying is, you want to strike a guy, you gotta grapple him. You want to grapple a guy, you gotta strike him. So kind of threw that at him,
Hmm.
and yeah, we got to the ground. I knew he wanted to get back up, and I said, "Fine, I'll let you get back up. I'll just take your head when I get up too." Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
it.
you like
And
I said, you grabbed the
yeah, I
shit
was just
out of his head. You knew it right there from that moment that
yeah.
you
No,
had it. He wasn't going anywhere, huh?
no, I didn't. I didn't know it. You know what? I didn't know I had it. I didn't know I was gonna get it. I just knew that he had to do one thing if he had to stand up. He had
Hmm.
to raise his chin. I just knew that. Like, the physiology of a 200-pound guy on your back, and you
Hmm.
have to stand up. You're gonna have to raise your chin. So knowing that, I just said, okay, let's connect the dots on this one. Like
Uh-huh.
depends on the situation. Let's connect the dots and just make it happen. And then come out the other end with the bulldog choke. I wasn't surprised, but I didn't know what was gonna happen. It's just kind of like it was one of those situations where just like one with the moment and let the
Mhm.
technique flow, let the beat flow,
Yeah.
and you just make it. You just make good music, And that was it.
Was that probably one of your highlights? Probably your biggest highlight in the UFC as of right there was winning that title and stuff.
Uh, I don't know, man. Yeah, the winning the title was cool. That was cool, but I definitely had some pretty intense fights that I really walked out a bigger man. I felt with those other fights. Yeah, the title was a title. What can I say? It was a title. But one of the guys who I really respected and had a lot of growth after that fight was like Dan Henderson, or even like Anderson Silva, or a fight where I felt like I really grew and gained a tremendous amount of experience, and a little bit kind of like a certification that okay, you're on another level, you're badass. It was like my fight against Pele. That fight, I got home from Japan and friggin' Joe Silva, the UFC matchmaker, like called me and goes, "Dude, what's your chin made out of? You gotta fight. You gotta fight with us." I'm like, well, I love Japan. I ain't leaving Japan. So if you want me to fight with you guys, you're gonna have to sign me on a deal that's non-exclusive.
Gotcha.
And that's how it is.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, you battled some warriors. We'll talk a little bit about obviously the Anderson Silva fight, the Renzo Gracie fight. That was a hell of a fight too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Obviously, the one everyone talks about, right? The one it's always you're probably sick and tired of talking about the Matt Hughes fight, right? The the
That one's cool too, man. And and the cool thing is, when I run into a guy like Matt Hughes, it's always for us. It's always, man, that's one of our craziest fights. Like for both of us, for him and me, it's a
Mhm.
fight that was really memorable. It really mattered, and it was legit. Yeah, it was the day where we could fight our fight, not fight the way the promoter wants us to, and also kind of like fight when we're ready, not fight because the promoter says, "Hey, you guys gotta fight next week."
Yeah.
None of that garbage was going on at the time. So when I see Matt, we're like, yeah, those were the times, those were the days, like those were the days. Guys can't say that. These
Absolutely.
guys, they can't. Yeah. So yeah, that was a fun fight, man.
Right.
Yeah,
All right,
crazy
let's
fight.
talk about some of your fights. Your I think the one that kind of cemented everything was obviously the one with Pat Militic. We talked about that earlier. Then the next fight was the Matt Hughes fight, right? The Matt Hughes fight went in controversy. Um, in my opinion, I think you submitted him. He passed out and he slammed you, and then you got knocked out. What do you think about that situation? Do you think if it would have played out a little bit differently, maybe your career would have been a little bit different in the UFC? Or I mean, it is what it is, and things just play out the way it is.
Well, the UFC would have been different. That's for sure. Um, but the fight, he got caught in the triangle. He got choked out. His one foot, his 1 foot gave back,
Yeah.
stepped away, and Big John said, "Let go of the fence, or else I disqualify you."
Mhm.
I didn't want to get disqualified right when I choke a guy out, and I basically I literally said this is not gonna end well. There's something.
You already kind of knew you were gonna brace for it.
Yeah, I mean, I
Okay.
knew. I just like the chances are this is not going to end well. There's a slim chance, that maybe I don't know. I snap Matt Hughes's neck or something, or or like I saw I'm gonna land on my back with a lot of weight, but
Mhm.
myself and another guy, I'm gonna take the brunt of it, and
Well,
yeah,
the rules for that one is if they would have called it with him passing out or you guys both, giving up, it would have gone to the belt holder, right? You would have won automatically, correct? Even if you guys were
yeah,
close.
yeah.
right?
It was weird because they didn't even when I hit the ground, everybody panicked.
Yeah.
And when saw my head hit the mat, everybody panicked. Even Big John panicked. He's apologized and basically said that was a mistake, and it's all good. Their hearts were in the right place. It's just a lot at that time, something like that never happened before. It's never happened since, and it just chalk it down to inexperience for everyone at that given moment, and I think we all learned from it.
Definitely.
Sport's a better sport as a result.
No, 100%, 100%.
Yeah.
Is there any other fights that you look back at that were, maybe one of your toughest? I know you talked a little bit earlier about that Dan Henderson fight,
Mm.
and how was that? And I guess kind of leading up to that fight, and then just was he a little bit stronger than you expected, better wrestler, or what with the Dan Henderson fight?
With the Dan Henderson fight, I felt that I performed better at the wrestling part than I thought I would,
Okay.
and yeah, I that for me that was a nice takeaway, and it was a good fight. I generally don't have any complaints about that fight. It was crazy. For me, that was young Carlos Newton at his peak. Young Carlos Newton. I think after that fight, I did grow up and become a better fighter. Yeah,
And hence you say growing up in the middle of the fight is like what, like just kind of training wise, taking training a little bit more serious, or just like the fight itself, or
Dan Henderson, I think, was that first caliber of fighter at that
okay,
level for me, where
okay,
I knew I was walking into a fight with another fighter of a certain caliber, of a caliber that I know I never fought against before. It was a fight where you're either gonna find out today if you're meant to do this or you're not.
gotcha.
Yeah, you're
Makes
gonna get
sense.
because Dan Henderson was before I fought Pat Miletich, Matt Hughes, Anderson Silva, Pele Landy, all these guys.
Yeah,
Dan Henderson was quite quite a formidable gatekeeper
yeah,
of a certain caliber that I had the unfortunate opportunity to have to go through, and I felt I went through it very bravely, very competently, and came out the other end. Came out of that fight a new fighter.
definitely.
Yeah,
100%. You'd
definitely.
say that every fight for you is coming out, to a new fighter, or is it something like you said, like that type of fight, that type of fighter changes you?
Well, there's a lot of factors going on. It's also what stage in your life are you?
Yeah.
What's going on in your life and so forth. Dan Henderson was a young Carlos Newton who was in the start of university. I had every career path ahead of me at that point.
Okay, I
All
get
right, MMA, being a professional fighter wasn't solidified as I didn't know I was going to do it for another 10 years after the Dan Henderson fight. Before the Dan Henderson fight, I didn't know, right? Um, I just trained. I I had just recently got new coaches, new trainers, and yeah, for me, it really did mark a new chapter in my whole career. I think, yeah, a 19-year-old kid went in that cage and came out a grown man. That's it. As a fighter, yeah,
that's now you were talking about some of them already. You named some. You named, I mean, some legends already. Fighting Anderson Silva. I think it was like in 2003.
hmm
In Pride. Um, I remember rewatching that fight not too long ago. You did
yeah,
good.
yeah,
You were doing good, man. Uh,
yeah.
what were your what was your main your goal in that fight? Was it to take him to the ground? Was it to not stand up with him again? This was Anderson Silva before, you know, he went to the UFC, obviously.
Yeah. With Anderson, I knew both of us were on the collision path. I knew also that he was a great fighter in his own right. I really respected the guy. But at the same time, also, I really thought, wow, this would be a really good fight. I think it's one of those fights where you got to do it. It might be a little too soon, but you should do it. You know, in Japan, you got to do it. I also had a great relationship with the Brazilians and
Okay.
even Anderson's coaches and stuff. We were all really cool. We all got along, and it was one of those fights where I know he respected the game. He's very he's like he and himself is a samurai in my eyes. So I felt it was a very honorable fight. Um, it may it may have been a fight where I said, this is where I'm going to test certain abilities, and then see again whether I can hang with these guys. Um, for the Anderson fight, a lot of my boxing skills were just starting to come together.
Okay.
I felt very comfortable with the stand up. All right, but again, too, I was just still much more of a wrestler and grappler at the time, and really pressing that aspect of the strategy. And also, too, that I knew that was Anderson's weak point in comparison to myself.
Gotcha.
Right, and also fighting in Japan too. I know they appreciate the ground game and so forth. You're not going to get biased by the judges and, you know, lose favor for that. At the same time, you know, it's the karate capital of the world, so they enjoy and appreciate the stand up just as much. So I felt that if I was to fight this guy at any time, I would prefer it to be in Japan. I think also for himself too. He
Gotcha.
would prefer it to be in Japan. I think both me and Anderson would prefer all our fights to be in Japan. Yeah, that's
It's just
just the way it
Japan.
was.
It's just
So,
something. It's different. It's different.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
Now, obviously, you spent most of your career and pride in Japan fighting, and I mean, you made your bigger name over there than over here. Not that you didn't make a big name here, but just Japan. It just is a difference. Do you like enjoy, you know, the wrestling ring compared to the cage? Cage limits a lot of things, correct?
yeah, yeah. And I think also just in Japan, I held a special. I held a different place from a lot of the foreign non-Japanese fighters. You know, I had a different. I had a special place. Yeah, I was Ronin. Yeah, it was good.
Now, looking back at all your career fights, what is one memorable one that you will like kind of always go down as, you know, something that you can always look back at?
I think you know, for me, it's like hmm, I have quite a few fights that I'll look back and be like, and the moments in those fights that I actually do look back at were very poignant, very specific, very clear, very sharp.
Okay.
All right, very sharp. Yeah, like even the point where I shoot on Anderson, I see the knee, I try to block it, and it just penetrates my guard. Like for me, that's a very poignant moment because I can see myself going in for the shoot. Not that I see myself, I literally can see through my eyes going for the shoot. My glove is up, protecting my face. His knees hitting my hand, penetrating so much force, get him down, and my body being frozen for a moment or two and trying to move and avoid his next two punches. Like I could see that very clearly. You know, very clearly. I can very clearly feel my head scraping against the cage as I'm falling to the mat when I choked out Matt from on top of the cage. Like little things like that. With Pele, I could still hear the hiss from when he threw his knee, you know, and hit me in the chin. I can still hear that very clearly. I can still feel my legs buckling and giving the thumbs up at the same time. I could feel it. I could see the first 3, 4 punches that Eric Paulson threw at me, and I slipped, and yeah, I could see that. I could see. Like also remember the time when Dan Henderson shot in on me, and I basically overwound his double leg takedown to reverse it, and we both ended up doing like a crazy somersault in the air. All right, so yeah, a lot of fights, lot of just technical moments that I know make a fighter a better fighter. Just those technical moments. I got quite a few.
If you have any advice to give, say, a fighter, starting an amateur, going to go eventually pro, and they're, in the beginning of their career, is there anything that you would give advice to, saying if, you were in the same shoes, saying that someone could have told you when you first started? Is there anything?
Well, learn about the commerce of your sport. Learn about how your sport is supposed to be regulated. Learn about the Ali Act. Learn about how the Ali Act helps regulate boxing, and insist on the same regulations for MMA. Insist that all combat sports are actually the same type of sport, just different rules, but the same sport. And insist on common and equal fair regulations, right across the board, so that if you're looking out for your fellow fighters, commerce and business practices are even and level across the board, it's going to help you out. All right, educate yourself and educate other fighters, and learn from other fighters too. You guys should be sharing ideas. Talk openly about how much you're getting paid.
That's something that was always
it's
never.
not freaking secret. Don't keep it a secret. It's a completely big mistake keeping it a secret. You think Mayweather Jr. fought for 101 million. You don't think Mayweather Sr. coming in after him is going to want 103 million? You talk about it. Talk about it openly. Talk about how long your contracts are, how many fights you got signed, how much you're being paid. Talk about it. Freaking post it. Post it. Because if anyone can do better, they'll do better. If you're worth it, they're gonna want to pay you more.
Gotcha.
Right.
Sounds good. Well, Carlos, I want to say thank you. I appreciate the time. I know we had a little bit of time, but I appreciate appreciate a lot, man, hearing the stories and stuff. And thank you so much for coming on, man. All right.
Your pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Hey, man. God bless and take care from Canada. All right. I gotta go
All
get
right.
it. Have a good one.
Thanks.